Hey, how are you today? I want to talk about the Second Amendment, free speech, social media, and Kaitlin Bennett. Welcome to Bernie Bro. Um, the Second Amendment, let's start with that. Um, some of my lefty friends in the audience may not like what I'm about to say, and maybe some of the more conservative and or libertarian leaning folks might. But I am a Second Amendment absolutist. I'm a juxtaposition because I actually personally hate guns, but I am a Second Amendment absolutist. And let me explain my position. Guns are part of the American political culture. I mean, the American Revolution, or what can be said about America, good, bad, or indifferent, from the times of the American Revolution to the present. Um, our country was founded to liberate ourselves from British rule, and we have a cultural attachment to the guns in this country, and and a lot of times guns were used for terrible purposes. There were other times it was used for positive purposes, and I do believe that most people today who own guns, regardless of their political affiliation, are basically law-abiding and decent people. And so I, do I think gun control works? I'm going to be honest. I do. If I lived in England or some other country in Europe, I would not challenge their anti-gun laws because those countries are safer than we are. However, I would not. At the same time, I would not challenge the right to bear arms in this country because it is in our U.S. Constitution. It's not in their charters, and it's not in their constitutions in the other countries. So it's up to them to decide what kind of gun laws they have. Here, it is in the U.S. Constitution, and because it is part of the Second Amendment. And I'm going to confess again, Second Amendment is my least favorite amendment to the U.S. Constitution, but I would not ever, ever in a million years remove it. Why? Because if you start to remove amendments that you don't like, who's not to say somebody's going to come along later on and remove the amendments that you do like. So I'm kind of glad it's hard to amend the Constitution, especially when it starts to take away people's rights. And even if you can make a constitutional case, because I've heard some progressives make the case that amendments interpreted too literally, and it meant for well-regulated militia, meaning that we need national defense, what have you. Some people interpret it that way on the left and say, well, that's what it meant, what have you. But here's the problem. If we start to implement gun control, I mean, really implement gun control, it would violate other amendments. The Our Fourth Amendment rights would be undermined. And unlike what Robert Bork said in 1986 when Reagan was trying to put him in the Supreme Court, um, we do have right to privacy. It is in the Fourth Amendment, not in wording, but we are entitled to right to privacy. Um, and the whole idea of the big bad government coming in to confiscate your firearms, that's a scary notion. And lefties, with the way the alt-right's been growing these days in the last few years, and they they are armed to the teeth, and we have a we have a we have a problem with domestic terrorism with regard even the Department of Homeland Security says um, that white nationalism is a bigger threat to national security than Islamic radicalism from abroad. And the Department of Homeland Security is correct. Because of that, lefties, with the growing, in the last 30 years, growing militia movements, and you're seeing the alt-right people. They went from being trailer park trash, toothless, redneck, hillbilly types to becoming young little dashing hipsters like Richard Spencer. And that's so scary. That's scary. I mean, they've had a makeover, and so they look respectable and so cool and edgy now. Some of these folks, and the alt right movement. These people are gun crazy, if you're African American, you're Jewish, you're Latino, you're part of the LGBTQ community, you're Muslim, or you could be just a white liberal. These alt-right people hate your guts, and they could go after y'all. Y'all need to defend yourself. You need to defend yourself against them. As I said, I don't own a gun. I don't plan to own a gun. But I'm rambling on. But let me go on about the Second Amendment here. Another reason, as I said, there are good people from all the center left, the centrist, center right that owns guns, and they're basically law-abiding citizens. Well, I don't want to give all these people one more reason to vote Republican. So liberals, and lefties, you got to be for the Second Amendment. And plus, on an economic populist perspective, a lot of gun manufacturing firms are unionized. I don't want to see one more unionized job disappear. I want to see as many living wage unionized jobs as possible. And so, for these reasons, for constitutional reasons, and for ideological reasons, and for economic security reasons, populist reasons, we need to preserve the Second Amendment. There, I made a left wing case for the Second Amendment. Some of y'all won't like it. Some of y'all will be like, meh, what have you. And some people will be like, oh, well, that's a refreshing point of view. I've never quite thought about it that way. I want to talk about free speech. My favorite amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and it does guarantee us, right to assemble, guarantee us, the freedom of religion. And sorry, Christian right, what I'm about to say is gonna get butt hurt, but it also guarantees Americans freedom from religion. Freedom of religion also means freedom from religion if you don't want to sit there and be badgered with religion. You have to. I am for as much religious freedom as possible. But if you're a non-religious person and you don't want any part of it, you shouldn't have to be, you shouldn't have to be subjected to people trying to force convert you. And so, I want my government, the American government, to be officially a secular government that allows individuals to practice their religious faith or choose to not be religious at all. Um, Now, I don't give a shit about nativity scenes and all that. In one areas where maybe think the ACLU just a little overboard, what have you. I think that that's being too alarmist or what have you. I see that's more cultural. Anything else? But you see, here's the thing. But there's a flip side to this. The religious right that wants to have America to be a totally religious state and institutionally and push religion on you. You can see what happens in small towns when one religious symbol in a government building can be there, but it has other religious symbols have to be there to coincide to make sure everybody has religious freedoms, and then you see some satanic um, creature in some town square beside the Ten Commandments, and you people from the religious right, you get butt hurt over that, but you brought it on yourselves. You've been demanding Christian symbols all over the place. And if you want to interpret freedom of religion, and you got to interpret it you got to have it for all, or the best way to have religious freedom is to not really have, monuments that's promotes a certain religious point of view. And here's another angle to this religious right. And it's one, and I'm going to give the Tea Party credit. One of the few times I'm going to give the Tea Party credit. Certain states like Oklahoma, I believe, outlaw Sharia law from coinciding with the law code. And all you liberals, and you mean well when you say, yeah, but we got to be tolerant. I'm all for tolerance, folks. But Sharia law, and I'm all for Muslims living here, and I'm all for them practicing their religion and living their lives. And I think that the bigotry against the Islamic community is absolutely unforgivable. But when you have right wing peoples bitching about religious freedom, but they want to sit there and physically outlaw a building of a mosque in a small little town when they have every right, just as much as Christian churches have a right to put a church in whatever part of town, as long as they got the money and resources for it. By the Sharia law, liberals, listen to this: Sharia law will infringe not only on the rights of Christians, Jews, atheists, and everybody else. It even infringes on the rights of people within the Islamic community that don't adhere to every tenet of Islam. And like any other faith, you got people in Islam who are like Christians and who are like Jews that kind of want to go and live their day-to-day lives and don't want to live by the exact letter of the law when it comes to their religious faith. Their rights need to be protected too. So the religious right, when you see Sharia law coming your way around your community, you're not going to like it. Just think about it. You allowed this to happen. And liberals, Sharia law, let me tell you, I mean, you're going to have to choose a side, liberals. You have to choose whether you want to support gay, lesbian, transgender, queer equality, or to have a religious code in a society which runs contrary to the best interests of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community. So think about that on both sides, religious right and well-meaning liberals. I want you to think about that with regard to Sharia law and how detrimental it is. Free speech. Let me talk about free speech for a moment. We got to favor absolute freedom of speech. First Amendment has to be absolute. It can't be negotiable. The First Amendment might not be pretty a lot of the times, but the alternative will always be uglier. Trust me. The First Amendment, when you hear the right wing bitching and moaning, I'm for freedom of speech. I ain't no snowflake. I ain't no pussy liberal that wants to silence people, clutch their pearls. Right wingers, the ones who are barking like that, yes, you do. Yes, you do. You sit there and bitch at the well-meaning liberals who get a little upset when there's Islamophobia rhetoric coming around. But then some of you people on the right who pretend to love the Jews and you're Israel firsters more than you are pro-America, and you sit there and talk about your pretend love for the Jews because you interpret a law, World War III and Iran and Israel throwing nukes at each other, and that just gets your jollies off. Well, you listen here, listen up, liberals, and you liberals who and think about it, you liberals that criticize Israel. Here's the thing. We all know y'all are cool with the Jews, but you don't like the shitty things that the Israeli government do to the Palestinians. So some people on the left do the BDS thing, the boycott, divestment, sanctions. Right wingers who bitches at the liberals about Islamophobia wants to go and outlaw protesters and criminalize the movement that wants Israel to be on their best behavior. And several states enacted this law. It's called the AntiBoycott Israel Act. And so a lot of these right-wingers who claim to be for freedom of speech, and some of them who pretend to love the Jews, John Hagee, Pat Robertson, people like that, are pretty damn cool with throwing protesters and political dissenters into jail for saying mean things about Israel. The First Amendment needs to be there for everybody, folks. Nobody in their right mind, another subject aside, nobody on their right mind likes the KKK or the neo-Nazis. Nobody. Not the average liberal, not the average bland centrist, not the average conservative. I think we're all on the same page here. If you're a decent human being, regardless of your political affinity on the left, right, or center. And let me say hello to one of my favorite people on Facebook. Hey, nobody in their right mind likes Nazis or Klansmen or neo-Nazis or what have you. But the First Amendment also protects their right to be on the internet, protects their right to be to have marches as long as they're abiding by the proper codes and paying the proper fees and all of that. They are not considered unreasonable. They have a right, like anybody else, for their free speech. They don't have a right to harm other people. They don't have a right to shoot people down or burn crosses on people's yards or harass or murder or anything. In fact, they do that, they should be rounded up, put in prison. Southern Poverty Law Center has done a wonderful thing. Whenever groups like the Aryan Nations attacked people or murdered people, they filed a lawsuit against Aryan Nations, and they shut that puppy down. They shut that puppy down by giving the money to the victims of the family that were harmed by Aryan Nations. That's the way you fight white nationalism. Saying that they're not allowed to exist if they're not harming anybody drives them further and further underground. You want that shit to be exposed so they don't go around becoming a violent movement and trying to relive the really disturbed contents of the Turner Diaries. No, y'all don't want that shit. I mean, so the First Amendment has to be. It needs to be It needs to be unblemished. It needs to be interpreted literally. That means Colin Kaepernick can sit down and kneel while the national anthem is going on. That means that means that people who don't like the American flag, if they own the damn flag, they have a right to torch it if they want to, as long as they're not violating fire codes, and as long they own that piece of cloth. The U.S. government has no right to sit there and put them in prison. And spare me about the veterans saying, "Oh, we fought for this country's right, and it's not right because we fought for all our freedoms." Well, the freedoms include the right to burn the U.S. flag. I mean, I don't believe in it. I mean, in fact, as a Eugene Debs-Norman Thomas, Bernie Sanders socialist, I go by what Norman Thomas said in the 1960s. I'd rather not burn the American flag. I'd rather cleanse it. And he called for public cleansing of the American flag. And And for those who've never heard of Norman Thomas, look him up. Look him up and look up Eugene Debs. Both men are the predecessor to the Bernie Sanders movement that exists today. So free speech needs to be remain absolute, and the Second Amendment needs to remain absolute. Now let's talk about social media for a moment. Social media, yeah, um, yeah. I'm so glad about 2006 when I got on social media. Got on MySpace back in the day. I'm on Facebook now. I'm on Twitter. Been on YouTube forever. Um, Prior to the age of social media, it was a wilderness for the left. It was a shutdown of left-wing voices in the media. And so what passed for liberalism or progressivism was basically NPR, which it really isn't all that liberal or progressive. A lot of corporate sponsorship to the Corporation of Public Broadcasting and NPR. CNN, please. CNN, MSNBC, yeah, sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're not. The words of Michael Moore when it comes to media, CNN basically is the second fiddler to Fox. Um, but there was nothing but right wing talk radio and Fox News. So you got a bunch of boomers and World War II generation people, and especially the World War II generation people who were more on the right leaning side, spending their afternoons listening to Rush Limbaugh and then spending their evenings watching Fox News, and that was their entertainment. And this is where they get their talking points from. And these people vote, and the young people don't. So the country leaned further to the right, especially during the George W. Bush presidency. And of course, with the George W. Bush presidency, I will argue and contend that he was the worst president we ever had. Not a fan of Donald Trump, but I've said this in 2008 between Obama and McCain. I don't care who wins this election because I'm really neither for Obama nor McCain. I voted for Ralph Nader. But whoever wins this election, anything will be an improvement from here on for the next 50 years, probably to George W. Bush, who brought us war, Wall Street deregulations, and tens of trillions of dollars in U.S. debt. Um, Romney, had he won in 2012, would have been an improvement to George W. Bush. Obama was an improvement to George W. Bush. Hillary Clinton would have been an improvement to George W. Bush. Even Donald Trump is an improvement to George W. Bush. That's how bad George W. Bush was. And that was, the narrative was whatever they could to go and protect Bush's ass for the disaster that was his presidency. About 2005, 2006, social media came along and they brought us the Young Turks. And they brought us, some of these other programs that I do watch pretty much every morning when I get off from work. So I work graveyard shift. So I come home and I check up on what the Young Turks or Kyle Kalinske or Jimmy Dore, or Kim Iverson, Nico House, Shoe on Head, David Packman, Sam Cedar, so forth, so on. La-di-da-da. Anyhow, I'll sit there and listen to what these people have to say, and I will value I value what they all have to say, but I come up with my own perspective and everything. So whether I'm watching The Amazing Atheist one moment, or I'm watching some other program, um, Jimmy Dore or what have you, or even watching Joe Rogan's program, I get these perspectives. They're really good and unique, and it's such a breath of fresh air to what passed for mainstream media, which you can see how the algorithms are messed up on YouTube. So whenever I sit there and log into my favorite programs, it'll suddenly log into something from Fox News or CNN, which makes me repulse. But I have rambled on, and I need to get to Kaitlin Bennett. Y'all don't know who Kaitlin Bennett is. She's basically representing the new wave of social media right-wing trolls. Um, she makes she makes she makes Alex Jones look like Rachel Maddow by comparison. Uh, I mean, she's really into her guns, and she totes around an AR-10 rifle, and she likes to go around college campus with a camera crew and try to provoke college students, with these silly questions and trying to get it, trying to trigger them, get a response. And she's got a narrative, folks. And that narrative is to try to provoke a violent reaction from some of these left wing students or left leaning students to say, well, you see, these left wing students, they're violent. No, we right wingers are not violent. We right wingers are so peaceful and we're so cool and we're so laid back. They just don't, they're intolerant. They accuse us of being intolerant, but they're the ones that are intolerant. Don't fall for that, folks. That's not true. I have actually been harassed by right wing people on the streets doing petition drives when I was in the Socialist Party USA. Yeah, I mean, they get triggered. How dare a socialist gets petitions? You see, that's what makes me better than they are, because, if the Constitutional Party, which is a right wing political party, came up to me and want me to sign a petition to get them on the ballot, I may not like what they stand for, but you know what? I'll go and grab that pad of theirs with the pen, and I'll go and write down my information and everything, and I'll be like, look, I don't agree with the Constitution Party, but I think you got a right to be on the ballot. Um, Libertarians, well, I find economic libertarianism an abomination, but I'm down with libertarians on social issues, drug war, anti-war stuff, legalization of marijuana, and depending on the libertarians you talk to, even most of them don't like the death penalty, and everybody, whether they're a left-leaning libertarian or right-leaning libertarian, whatever reason, whether they're kind of cool with the gays and what have you. So it's kind of like, okay, I can deal with the libertarians a little bit better than I can with the Constitutional Party. So if the Revolutionary Communist Party came up to me and wanted to get on the ballot, I certainly don't agree with Maoism, because I'm not a communist. But you know what? Just like I would do with the Constitutional Party, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to do my part to see you're on the ballot, because I think that ballot access is a form of freedom of speech. But anyway, this lady, she's an idiot. Kaitlin Bennett, as I said, she walks on campus and finds presumably liberal left-leaning students, and to try to trigger a violent response. And this is my advice to all these left-leaning students. Please, whatever you do not, even if you feel like you want to go and smack her, don't do it, because it feeds into the narrative. And then on the public relations side of the equation, we lose on the left. We need to prove that our ideas are better, and we're so confident about our ideas that we do not need to sit there and cuss somebody out and physically attack somebody because we're offended by what they believe. I mean, I get offended by a lot of stuff out there. A lot of things people say offend me, but you know what? I'm glad they're saying it, even though I may not like it, because I value my freedom of speech. See, that's what makes me different from the right wingers who beat their chest and I want my freedom of speech protected, and you liberal pussy snowflakes ain't gonna take my right to freedom of speech. Nobody should. But those right wing people who's beating their chest, acting like they're the biggest alpha males around, they are the ones that will go take away people's rights to speak in a heartbeat. I promise you that is the case. But Kaitlin Bennett is a moron. I mean, she's an aggravating troll. She's not even good at it. She's not even good at trolling people, trying to get a response. And what I've seen on YouTube in the last couple of months, a good friend of mine introduced me to Kaitlin Bennett, and he likes her on the gun question, which that's okay, but not so much on everything else. And oh, the name of the program that she's with is called Liberty Hangout. I hate it when the right wing people exploit the term liberty because they're not. Kaitlin Bennett is not for liberty. And the worst the radio talk show host around, Mark Levin, has a program on Fox called Life, Liberty, and Levin. Sorry, Mark Levin ain't for liberty. During Bush years, that motherfucker favored the surveillance state and favored torture, and he probably fucking masturbated to the Iraq War night and day. And and for the right wing to sit there, and when I say the right wing, I am talking about the authoritarian right, whether they're authoritarian right because they're racist, or whether they're not necessarily racist, but still right wing authoritarians in their own way, and maybe racially indifferent. Um, they're still authoritarians. And I would say the same thing about the authoritarian left, the PC crowd, the one they're clutching their pearls and all of that. And anyway, that's what I have to say. I ramble on long enough, but I just wanted to talk about Kaitlin Bennett and other stuff, which I did for the past 32 minutes. Listen, I want you all to subscribe to this channel and tell your friends about my channel, Bernie Bro. And I also want you to comment, good, bad, or indifferent. And I want you all to agitate for a peaceful revolution.